It's been a while, but I'm once again going to venture into some small towns across the globe and see what horrors we can find. These subscribers sent in their allegedly true experiences while living in small towns. As always, it is up to you whether you believe these stories or not. If you have a story you would like to share in a future video, be sure to submit it at swampdweller.net or the email you can find in the description down below. I would love to share your story with everyone here in the swamp. Now, without further ado, let's get into these creepy stories. So this just happened 2 nights ago, so it's still fresh in my mind. I live in Wisconsin, not too far from Milwaukee, about an hour north, more farmlands area. I can't lie, I am an avid marijuana user, so to be blunt, my fiance and I were what we call burn cruising. So we had the windows partly open, as it's winter, and we do not want a hotbox in case we get pulled over. We're passing a house listening to music. I take a hit and turn and see a house, and as I focus on the small part of the roof that comes out of an odd place like the second floor just below a window, I see what looks like a dish. Behind it, however, I see something else. It turns its head and immediately faces me, as if it sensed me seeing it that briefly. It had big, black eyes like nothing was there. But there clearly was. I was so focused on the eyes for the moment that I was looking at it. I then turned my head, rolled up my window, and didn't say anything. We were on our way back and took the same route we cruised out. I hadn't said anything to my fiance, but as we got closer and I realized we'd be taking the same way back, I had to, and I wasn't scared, but couldn't stop tearing up. As we passed the house, I pointed it out, but couldn't look. My fiance said there was no dish whatsoever, so whatever I saw was much larger than I had originally assumed, probably more in the realm of 7 feet. I feel like I was not supposed to see it, because it was gone when we passed coming back. I grew up in a small town in England that had a lot of history. The town had a 900-year-old castle, a 500-year-old bookstore, multiple 250-plus-year-old hotels, and even the ruins of a monastery that dated back over 1,000 years. Needless to say, the town has seen a lot. By contrast, my primary, or elementary to Americans, school building was quite new, pre-World War I at the oldest. To give you an idea of the layout of the main building, it had a small entryway that leads to a hallway that had no windows to the playground on one side and 3 classrooms to the right side. At the end of the hallway was the teacher's lounge and offices. The windows that this old building did have were unusually high up, so if you wanted to look out or in, someone would have to stand on a chair. That part is an important part that's going to happen later. It was a nice school, but sadly was scheduled to be demolished, and we were to move to a new building after only my first year there. A mixture of location, student numbers, and structure quality if I remember correctly. There were a few incidents and stories from the school, but this will focus on what happened to me. A simple and almost cliché incident was my first one. I and my friend were alone in our classroom one day, because we had to clean a mess we made, as little kids do, and jabbering on about soccer. No doubt, knowing us when we heard the unmistakable sound on the classroom door opening and closing. We instinctively turned to see no one there. Nobody had come in, and the window on the door showed no one on the other side. I suppose someone could have jumped to the side, but we were close enough to the door that we would have heard footsteps outside. These weren't the thickest of doors after all. It was weird, but that one can easily be explained by an adult, so I didn't think too much of it. The second experience, I was selected to drop off the roll call sheet in the school office one day, a major honor for a kid at that age. So I grabbed the sheet and exited the classroom and slowly made my way to the office. taking my time so I could miss as much of the morning math class as possible. My classroom was at the far end of the hallway, so I could burn a few minutes if I went slow enough. About halfway there, I heard footsteps behind me. My initial thought was the teacher had come to tell me to hurry up, except I didn't hear a door opening. It was winter and all the doors were closed. I stopped and looked behind me to see nothing. Most adults would have been confused, but I was a scared little kid, so I skipped ahead to freaking the heck out for reasons that will become more clear shortly and began to quicken my pace. Math didn't sound so bad at this point. Almost like out of a movie, the second I turned my head, the footsteps began again. Nope, time to break the rules and run like crazy to the office. I entered the office in a sprint and dropped the roll call sheet on the desk, and the confused notary looked at me. "You know you weren't supposed to run in the hall," was the initial response. Go figure, right? This third event had me up all night. Another occasion in which I and my friend were in class alone after everyone else was gone. I swear this wasn't a frequent occurrence. We were reasonably well-behaved kids. At one point, my friend left for reasons I don't remember, and I was left alone. Now, just to quickly fill you in, this incident occurred before the hallway footsteps, so I had no issue being alone. I was doing schoolwork in silence when I looked up to read the board and I saw my friend's shadow next to me fetching something from the back of the room. Except, he hadn't come back yet, and the door on the other side of me hadn't opened since he left. This shadow that I now focused on was too big, both in height and girth, to be my scrawny 9-year-old friend. I screamed and got out of there in a heartbeat, passing my teacher, who was immediately concerned, understandably. All I could get out of my mouth was heavy breaths, so the teacher went into the classroom. She came out and told me that there was nothing there. No people, animals, insects, or anything. At this time, my friend finally returned and was understandably confused. I told him later that he just looked at me strangely after I told him no. I must admit, though, he was surprisingly level-headed for a 9-year-old. I have thought about it many times and can find some explanation, but the windows were just too high for someone to be looking through. And even if they weren't, that area was closed off from the students, so nobody would have been able to been there anyway. That was as bad as it got, thankfully. The next year we moved into a new, more modern building, and with the exception of my teachers, I had no new scary incidents. To basically cap off the whole story, there was one last twist. After the school had been demolished, the construction workers made a fascinating and yet terrifying discovery. Under that building lay at least 12 skeletons that dated back centuries. Theories ranging from the site once being a site where plague victims ended up to a temporary hospital during a battle on the outskirts of town could be found in the papers, but I don't think the origins of the body were ever truly discovered. That said, it certainly had my hair stand on end. Before I begin, I'm not sure how creepy this story really is, but if you take a moment to consider the unpredictability of the human psyche, this may fit into the category just fine. I grew up in a small town in southern New Jersey. I was an 18-year-old male, freshly out of high school and working my first jobs. My first job was a Blockbuster Video. It was pretty cool. The job was a cakewalk for the most part. It really just consisted of standing around renting out and checking in movies. Most of our customers were okay, save for one that I'll never forget. My co-workers and I dubbed her the Britney Spears lady. She was easily in her 40s, wore a pair of skin-tight jeans, tacky tube tops, wore makeup that screamed the clown college switch to Revlon, and always had her bleached blonde hair and pigtails. She was only missing the headset microphone. I'm not kidding. She was that customer that garnered a collective, "Oh snap, not again," when we saw her near dancing through the parking lot towards our store. She always acted like a snob and showed us that it was possible to function on 6 IQ points. In short, her personality sucked. Then came the day most of us will never forget, 9/11. I was at the bank dropping off a deposit for my manager while the chaos unfolded on the televisions behind the teller's desk. I rushed back to the store to find my manager in tears. The rest of the day was quiet. The franchise owner called and told us to shut down after we got everything cleaned up and made a sign stating we were closing earlier due to the events unfolding. We were just about to put the phones on the answering machine setting when you know who called. She spoke with my manager and informed her she was trapped in New York City with movies in her car. I pulled up her account and found, yes, she in fact had 11 films out. We found this to be a bit suspect because they had all been rented the night before. Still, my manager spoke to the owner and he gave her 5 days to get them back and he would waive the $200 fee. She shows up 12 days later. Mind you, my manager was still willing to wipe her slate clean up to 10 days worth of fees. That is until she comes through the door, yelling, scoffing, and eye-rolling. "I called you high school dropouts and told you I was trapped in the Poconos." Now, you don't have to be a geography major to figure out the Poconos Mountains are nowhere near New York. I watched my manager get so angry, I thought she was going to have an aneurysm. She flipped out on the lying, snotty woman and banned her from the store. On her way out, she screamed at a Spider-Man cutout. We were raffling off and failed miserably at trying to tip it over, almost spilling over as she pushed it. Of course, she tried to get my manager fired. Thank God for security footage showing everything she did, and yeah. The ban not only held firm at our store, but at the 6 other stores the franchise owner ran as well. So there you have it. The creepiest thing I have ever had a customer do in my 17 years of working is attempting to use a national tragedy as an excuse to get out of late fees. My childhood friend Max lived in a home that was relatively old. Well, old enough to have had something terrible happen to it. Rumor has it that a construction worker died on the job while building the house. Now, I can't say with 100% certainty that this happened, but it seems the most logical. Also, Max lives next to my grandparents' house. This was a 2-hour drive from my house. They live out in the middle of nowhere in a small town. This means I usually only saw him once every 2 or 3 months. Anyway, Max's parents got divorced and his mother couldn't afford the house much longer. I bring this up because I, at the time, never experienced anything paranormal while I was inside his house. It was around November 2012 when I visited Max at his old house for the last time. We did what normal 12-year-old kids do: eat junk food, explore the neighborhood, get in trouble, stuff like that. However, since this was our last time hanging out, I wanted this moment to go out with a bang. I forgot how we ended up talking about ghosts, but it happened. Anyway, 12-year-old me was hyped up on caffeine from some Pepsi, thought it was probably a good idea to provoke the ghost. Bad idea in hindsight. I placed the empty soda can on the floor and said, "If there's a ghost, please move this soda can." This happened 3 or more times before I could say it a 4th time. Across the house, the laundry door slammed. And I mean it slammed shut. Max and I looked at each other with opened mouths and wide eyes. For a reference point, imagine a long rectangle. Max and I were at the bottom right of the rectangle, and the laundry room was on the top left side of the rectangle. Anyway, Max and I slowly crept to the other side of the house to see what happened. I opened the laundry door and found nothing. Well, the ghost or demon or whatever also physically turned the light switch to the laundry room as well. Needless to say, we ran like a bat out of hell. Now I know what you're thinking. Something completely rational happened and we're overthinking it. Well, you're wrong. Max's mother was at her day job, and it was only Max and me at his house when it happened. Nobody else. Okay, what about the wind? The only thing opened was the front door, which was right next to us. Either way, no wind was blowing that day, and there was no draft to speak of. There's also no way wind could travel from the entrance of the house, turn 90 degrees left, go down the kitchen all the way to the laundry room. but also doesn't explain how the light switch got flipped. After the incident, I went back home and haven't talked to Max since. I do occasionally ride past the house and think of that incident. I've also had several severe paranormal cases happen at my own house after visiting Max's house. This makes me believe I was followed home by an unknown entity. I live in Joplin. When the EF5 came through in 2011, I was at work. It was almost closing time, and I was outside smoking a cigarette because the store was dead. I noticed incredibly low clouds, almost as if I could reach up and touch them, and saw the sky change colors from the overcast gray to a sort of hazy green or yellow. I finished my cigarette, went inside, and looked at the radar. It was gnarly. I heard sirens. I'd heard them a million times before and always ignored them. I did the same here, though I suspected a tornado was imminent based largely on old wives' tales about the green skies. I texted my wife to tell her that a tornado was possible and to be safe. She asked me when and where. I told her that's not the kind of thing I could guess at. That's the last time we spoke for several hours. I got a call from a coworker telling me he was going to chase a tornado. I told him to be safe and called him an idiot, and started to get ready to lock up. We were supposed to close at 6, but it was a sales job with bad weather on graduation day, and only like 3 customers all day. I didn't figure locking up early would be a problem. The rain had already started at this point. Soft at first, but picking up quickly. I tidied up, did some paperwork, and went to lock the door. The front of the store is all glass, and when I looked out, I could see debris on the ground basically crossing the street just to my south. It looked like dirt and rocks, maybe some scrap wood. Stuff was definitely flying. I knew right then what was happening, though not exactly how bad it was about to get. Someone pulled into the parking lot, presumably seeking shelter. I tried to open the door to let them in, but couldn't push it open. I'm about 6 foot, and at the time weighed probably 280 pounds or so, and I couldn't physically move the door. That's when I knew exactly how bad it was about to get. The windows started to shake, almost bowing. I backed away quickly and watched as it hit me that this was now a life or death situation. I had worked in TV news before and knew just how dangerous this stuff can be. I went to lock myself in my boss's office, but he'd locked the door for the weekend. Before I could turn to head to another room, the roof was gone. Holy crap, this is happening. I don't know why, but I thought the safest thing to do would be to squeeze myself as much into the door frame of my boss's office as I could. That's what I did. Something flew through the store and hit me in the back. It hit me so hard I spun all the way around, on the ground, and landed on my stomach. I put my right hand and arm over the back of my head. I pulled my phone out of my pocket with the left hand and tried to frantically call everyone I could. I tried to call 911 as if firefighters could show up and stop what was happening. I tried to call my family to tell them I needed help ASAP. I tried calling my wife to tell her I loved her. I just knew I was going to die, and I needed to tell her that I loved her before it happened. Nothing. Cell signal was gone, so I laid there trying to protect my phone in case I survived so I could get help. I waited to die. That's the most messed up thing I've ever experienced. The next seconds are a blur. I heard everything but saw nothing. I kept my face buried. After what felt like hours, it just kind of all stopped. The rain tapered to a sprinkle. What felt like hail, but definitely could have been debris falling, stopped. I just laid there. I honestly wasn't sure if I had died or not. Then I heard the screaming. It came from all different directions. People screaming for help. For some reason, that told me it was okay to get up. I stood up and looked around, and there was a van in the middle of what used to be a pizza place next door. I think it had been thrown from the academy across the street. It hadn't been there before. I was the only person in my store, and everyone in the pizza place seemed okay. The other screams were too far away, so I just ran. A car drove by, and I flagged it down. It was a couple from California. They were only in town for a graduation and had never seen anything like this. I was covered in blood, with open wounds all over my head, neck, and arms. I could hear the wife tell the husband to leave me and that they needed to save themselves. But he said, "He's hurt, we can't just leave him." Thanks, dude. I got in the back seat with their kids. They were very young and very scared. The bloody, bruised stranger sitting next to them only made that worse. I had to coach the couple a little bit about not driving over power lines and how to use a defrost for the windshield. Seriously, the wife was just wiping the condensation with a towel. And it would be just coming right back. They were panicking just like I was. It was chaos. The husband asked me where I needed to go. I said, "I'll go wherever, just get me away from here." So they took me to the Motel 6 they were staying at. When we got there, there were a bunch of people standing around. The motel luckily hadn't been hit, so everyone there was safe for the most part. They were just watching the show. The never-ending parade of emergency vehicles flooding into the city. Hundreds, it seemed, in the couple of hours I sat there. The people at the motel saw me and flew into action. One woman busted out a first aid kit, another guy was grabbing me towels to dry off. My favorite person that afternoon gave me a few cigarettes because mine were ruined after being in my pocket after all of this. After they got me settled and calmed down, the woman who was doctoring me up asked me how bad it was. I remember exactly what I said to her. "It's gone." "What's gone?" she said. "All of it. Everything. For miles. I could see the hospital. It's on fire." I'll never forget the look in her eyes when I said that. The hospital was a few miles from my store. I couldn't see the building itself, but I could see the fire. I knew exactly what it was from. It takes a big building to shoot flames that high. Some of you may remember this storm knocked the gigantic building off of its foundation. After I sucked down a cigarette, I tried calling again. Nothing. My phone was waterlogged too. I just set it down and went back outside. I figured I'd eventually walk home if I had to, but I wasn't doing it until I was certain the storms had passed and I wouldn't be in any rescuer's way. Eventually, that same woman came outside holding my phone. "Whose phone is this?" It was ringing. The one phone call had left in it. I thanked her, took it and answered it. It was my mom. Are you okay?" she said. "Yeah, I'm okay. Are you guys okay?" "Yeah." "Is my wife okay? Have you talked to her?" "Yeah, everybody's fine." "Is your house still there? Is my house still there?" "Yeah, everything's okay. It didn't really come out here. Where are you?" I was so relieved at that moment that I was the only person in my family to experience this. I thought at the time I would be the only one who was mentally strong enough to be okay after something like this. I found out later I was wrong about that, but I felt good at that moment. My mom called my wife and told her where I was. She and her parents came to get me. A couple of hours later, they got through the traffic and showed up. She took me home and spent an hour or so pulling the glass out of my scalp and picking out pieces of asphalt and gravel that had been embedded in my ears and neck. My boss was out of town and didn't believe a tornado had hit. When he found out it was true, he immediately tried to get to me. His wife eventually found my wife on Facebook and we were able to speak. He was incredible through everything. The next few days were filled with very little sleep and crippling fear. I didn't lose my cool until later. No crying, nothing, it was surreal. The following weeks, months, and years were full of panic attacks and anxiety medication though. I dealt with survivor's guilt for a long time. I thought for sure the people who pulled up looking for help had died in the storm. I couldn't prove it, but they weren't there when I got up. I found out later by happenstance that they survived. I never saw the couple from California again, and I never got to thank them. I'd love to maybe try to track them down someday to thank them for taking a chance on me. I am mostly okay now, save for about 6 weeks in April and May. I've dealt with it and I'm over it. We take sirens very seriously now. Around first grade, I became friends with this kid named Stan. He was a couple of years older than I was, but he had a sister that was my age who I was also friends with. I also had a crush on their oldest brother, James. I was that girl who chased the poor, uninterested boys all around the playground. I lost contact with all 3 kids around middle school. Of course, when Facebook happened, I began getting in touch with people I'd gone to school with.
It was a moderately sized K through 8th grade school, so you were basically with the same exact group of kids for each grade. This makes some pretty strong bonds, because there's a lot of us who kept in contact after moving on to high school for a little while before drifting apart. Because of this, I was always really excited when I got back in touch with those people. However, not all of these connections have been positive. I got a friend request from Stan one day, under a different name. The messages were the typical, "How's it going? What have you been up to?" etc. Then he started sending messages that were about my looks. They weren't obscene, but they did make me a bit uncomfortable. He started pushing to meet up. I can't explain it, but I just had a really off feeling about him, so I could kind of avoid making any kind of plans. He continued to be pushy about things, and finally I just stopped responding to his messages. He started pushing to meet up. I can't explain it, but I just had this really off feeling about him, so I would kind of avoid making any kind of plans with him. He continued to be pushy about things, and I finally just stopped responding to his messages. I should also message that when I first accepted Stan's friend request, he literally went through every single one of my pictures and liked them. That should have been my first clue, but I just let it go. Then I started getting messages from my friends and even some family members asking me about him. Stan was basically going through and sending everyone friend requests. By this point, I'm like, okay, this is definitely weird. But things got really nuts when my cousin informed me that Stan had not only tried to friend her, but he'd also sent her a message asking all sorts of questions about me, such as things I liked or places I liked to go. My cousin was concerned that he was sending all these kind of messages to people who might actually tell him what he wanted to know. I debated sending Stan a message to tell him to back off, but decided just to block him and changed all my Facebook settings to make it as private as I possibly could. I also sent out a mass message to all my friends and family informing them of the situation and to kindly not give out any of my personal information. I was friends with James but ended up blocking him as well, just to prevent Stan from getting access to anything. Things were quiet for about a week. Then, the friend requests from random accounts started coming in. Some didn't have pictures, some had random images, and they were accompanied by messages that made it clear that they were all from Stan. Full of skeevy comments on my looks and how he was wanting to hook up. And that's putting it mildly to say the least. Every day I had an account that I needed to block. I contacted Facebook about the situation, though that didn't really help. It finally came to a stop when I threatened Stan with police intervention. My boyfriend at the time threatened to disembowel Stan and feed him his intestines with a side of fava beans and a nice Chianti. The peace lasted for about a year. Then I got a friend request from a girl I'd also gone to school with named Kelsey. We talked pretty frequently both online and over the phone. She wanted us to hang out so we could talk about some things, but then she started bringing things up more frequently. I started to get that weird feeling again that something wasn't right. She kept wanting to hang out and always at odd times. Then came the bombshell. Kelsey and Stan were dating. We'd all been in the same classes, so the fact that they knew each other wasn't strange. But for them to be dating? I confronted Kelsey about it and blocked her, but because we talked on the phone and they had my phone number, of course they both began calling and texting crazy things nonstop. I finally had to get a new number and change it. It's been over 10 years since all of this has happened and I haven't heard from Stan once. Kelsey did try to friend me recently with a different account, and I looked through her Facebook and it shows she's married to another man and there's no evidence to Stan there. So I think I might, but I don't know. I don't think I'm taking any chances.
Thanks for listening to these creepy small-town stories that are claimed to be true by those who sent them in. As always, it is up to you to decide whether you believe them or not. Thank you very much once again. If you enjoyed these stories, please hit that like button as it helps me out a ton. The more likes this video gets, the more YouTube pushes it to new and fresh viewers. If you have a story you would like to share in a future video, be sure to do that by submitting it at swampdweller.net or the email you can find in the description down below. I would love to share your story with everyone here in the swamp. It's stories like yours that keep this channel going. If you're new, why not subscribe, turn on notifications, and never miss a new video, as I upload them almost every single day, and all things natural and supernatural. If you aren't aware, you can download your favorite scary stories from the swamp via iTunes, Spotify, and pretty much every other major podcasting platform, so definitely take advantage of that. I also have new merch for sale, so if you want to support the channel outside of watching the videos, definitely go check out and pick up some cool new threads. If you made it to the very end of this video, let me know by commenting "Dancing Jeepers" to let me know that you made it all the way to the end and to confuse everybody else. Anyways, I'll see you all soon with another creepy video.